Welcome back to the Optometry Club. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a condition you are absolutely going to see probably almost daily in your practice: color vision deficiency. We're going to go way beyond just the basics of the screening tests to really get a handle on the patient's world and, the fascinating science behind it all. Okay, first things first, let's get our language right. In the clinic, we need to be precise. We call this color vision deficiency, or CVD, not color blindness. And you might ask, why does that matter? Well, it matters because true color blindness, we're talking seeing the world in black and white, a condition called achromatopsia, is incredibly rare. For the vast majority of our patients, it isn't an absence of color at all. It's a difficulty telling certain shades apart. And trust me, using the right term is the very first step in providing good patient care. So we're going to tackle this just like a clinical workup. We'll start with the fundamentals. What is CVD? Then we'll get into the biology of how we even see color in the first place. After that, we'll explore the different types and what causes them. And finally, we'll get practical and talk about diagnosis and management right there in the clinic. All right, let's jump into our first section. The goal here is to really understand what the patient is actually experiencing and to bust some of those common myths that are floating around out there. Okay, check out these numbers, because they tell a really interesting story right off the bat. Look at that massive difference. About 8% of males are affected, but only 0.5% of females. When you see a statistic like that, it should immediately be a huge clinical clue for you. It practically screams that this has genetic origins, specifically an X-linked recessive trait. This is probably the most important thing to get across when you're talking to a patient. They do see color. The issue isn't a world without color. It's a world where certain colors are really tough to tell apart. For someone with that common red-green deficiency, trying to distinguish between, say, a red and a green, especially in dim lighting, can be almost impossible. Now, as future optometrists, you have to know the physiology here. It's just non-negotiable. So let's take a look under the hood at the biology of how we perceive color. So it all starts in the retina with these special photoreceptors we call cones. They're packed into the macula, and they contain these amazing light-sensitive pigments. Now, we have 3 types of cones, and you can think of each one as being tuned to a specific radio station, but for light. We've got long wavelength for red, medium for green, and short for blue. At its very core, color vision deficiency is just a problem with one or more of these pigments. So here's how it's all supposed to work. Light comes into the eye, it hits the retina, and it activates those cone cells. The pigments inside those cones then register the different wavelengths of light, and bam, that information gets zapped up the optic nerve to the brain for processing. CVD happens when there's a glitch, a breakdown, right there at step 2. The pigments just don't register a specific wavelength the way they should. Okay, now that we have that biology down, we can start to look at all the different ways this process can get messed up. And that's going to lead us right into the various types and causes of color vision deficiency. Now, in your exam chair, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see red-green deficiency. But it is absolutely vital that you can also spot the signs of a blue-yellow deficiency. It's a lot rarer, yeah, but it's also more severe. And interestingly, it often comes along with a red-green deficiency. These are the patients who might tell you they see gray or just neutral tones where there should be vibrant colors. This table is fantastic because it lays out the key differences you need to be looking for. Inherited CVD, it's there from day 1, it affects both eyes equally, and it stays the same throughout their life. Acquired CVD, though, that's a different beast. It can pop up later in life, often in just one eye, and the severity can actually change over time. Making this distinction during your case history is absolutely critical. I really want you to focus here because this is so important for your differential diagnosis. A new sudden onset of color vision deficiency can be a major red flag for some serious systemic diseases. Think diabetes, glaucoma, macular degeneration. It could also be a side effect of certain medications, or maybe from chemical exposure, or sometimes it's just a part of getting older. The bottom line is, if a patient says their color vision has changed, you have got to think beyond the eyes. All right, enough with the textbook stuff. Let's move into the exam room. How are you actually going to diagnose this when you have a patient sitting right there in your chair? It's pretty amazing, but a lot of people with inherited CVD have no idea they have it. Their entire lives, they've just learned that the grass is called green and a stop sign is called red, so that's the label they put on the color they see. This is exactly why we screen for it, especially with kids, because so much of their learning in school is color-coded. So our number one diagnostic tool has this very fancy scientific-sounding name, pseudoisochromatic plates. But you all know what they really are. It's the Ishihara test. This simple book of colored dots is going to be your absolute go-to for both screening and making a definitive diagnosis. And using these plates really does two things for us. First, it just confirms whether or not a deficiency is even there. Can the patient see the number hidden in the dots? If they can't, or if they see a totally different number, well, there's your answer. And second, by looking at which specific plates they get wrong, you can actually figure out the type and severity of their deficiency, whether it's red-green or blue-yellow. Okay, so you've done the tests, you've made the diagnosis. What's next? In this last section, let's talk about what we do, how we manage the condition, and how we counsel our patients. Now, when you're counseling your patients, managing their expectations is everything. For inherited CVD, you have to be clear, there is no cure. Our goal here is management and adaptation. But for acquired CVD, it's a completely different conversation. If we can treat that underlying cause, that disease, that injury, whatever it is, we might actually be able to improve their color vision. These are some real-world practical strategies you can share. Some people find that specially tinted glasses or wearing a red-tinted contact lens in just one eye can help. But honestly, the most effective tools are often the simplest adaptations. Things like having a family member help them label their clothes, or just memorizing the order of things instead of relying on color, like knowing that on a traffic light, red is always on top. And I want to leave you with this one last thought to take with you into your careers. Today, right now, our focus is all on management and adaptation. But out there on the horizon, there is some incredible research happening. Gene therapies have already restored color vision in animal models. This is not science fiction anymore. So the big question for your generation of optometrists is this: how will a potential cure for inherited CDV completely revolutionize the way we approach this condition? Something to think about. That's all for today's explainer. We'll see you next time at the Optometry Club.